That's all right. So how do you justify someone not being a worker? That's the key. And actually, the cheat sheet that Andy put up at his talk really kind of spoke to that concept. And the way you do it is not imposing, certainly not expressly imposing any obligations on that person. Now, we all know, we've all sort of been at school and done work experience and so on, where you shadow somebody around for a week and you're basically useless and you get in the way. And you're not there to do any work. But equally, if you've ever worked in sort of PR or media, I understand you can work for months doing quite critical work for a company and still not get paid. Well, that model is probably now illegal, and it has been for 10 years. But there's obviously a bit in the middle where you're learning and you're working. And you know, that is fair enough, but I think if you want to stay within the rules, you've got to make sure that anybody you have coming in is sort of there, and they're always learning. So you give them training, you get them involved in things that are possibly, you know, not just doing the data entry or whatever. You get them involved in the more interesting things, so they can say they've got experience, it's useful for their CV. It's giving them valuable experience, and that will run out. There'll be a finite time, which will very much depend on the facts. So if they're doing data entry, that's going to be a pretty short period of time. If they're doing design and tech work, that's going to be a longer period of time. So you've got to keep an eye on those sorts of things, and make sure people progress from being an intern to being a paid employee, or they go off and do something else and get a job elsewhere or an internship elsewhere. And that will sort of keep you legitimate. And also, you know, you don't want to have a reputation for being a sort of sweatshop that takes advantage of people. The authority that polices this is the good old HMRC. I understand if they come in and do an inspection, and they will do an inspection if there's been a complaint, somebody feels they've been hard done by, or maybe their parent, you know, is a lawyer or something like that, and somebody makes a complaint. And they come in and have a look. My understanding is that they will take a pragmatic approach, and welcome, come in. They will take a pragmatic approach, and they won't sort of go in there straight away with a fine. But what they will do is ask you to. Oh my God, sweet.
Hello, everyone.
Did you come in? I didn't know. They will take. You know, you'll have to pay the poor chap. You know, or girl, whatever they should have been paid under minimum wage, and you promise not to do it again. If you keep making a habit of it, you can get fined. So that's interns. So at the other end of the scale, you have your valuable employees who you so much want to keep and look after that you're going to give them shares in your company. And I know, Rachel, you asked a question about shares, and I think other people did as well. And what's the deal with shares, and in particular, what's the deal in relation to tax? Well, it's really, really simple. If you reward someone with shares, it's exactly the same as paying them in cash, as far as the taxman is concerned. He will see that as a benefit, and he will tax it accordingly. So, did you have a question?
What about with options?
Right, I'm coming to that. Okay. So he will tax that accordingly, and if you sell your shares cheaply to your employees, i.e. under market value, the difference will be a taxable benefit as well. So the taxes will be the regular payroll tax. You'll get the PYE, and frankly the taxman will look to you to have deducted that, regardless of the ultimate liability, and there'll be national insurance on that as well. And that applies basically to anybody who works for the company. And the HMRC will include directors in that, whether they work full-time in the business or not. So doling out shares to your non-execs can land everybody with a tax bill. So, what to do? You do an option scheme. There's a very nice scheme, the Enterprise Incentive Management Enterprise, sorry, EMI, Enterprise Management Incentive Scheme. Thank you very much. So you set one of these up. It works on the option basis. So you can give a grant of options. So when someone's got a grant, they hold the option. They don't hold the shares until they exercise. You pay no tax on the grant. I just quickly say there are criteria that you have to fulfill if you want to be a company setting up an EMI scheme. But frankly, most tech companies, most tech startups are broadly going to comply. So there's no tax to be paid on the grant of the option. The tax comes in at the exercise, but the tax you pay at the exercise is the difference between the price paid for the grant, if any, and the price of the shares at the time of the grant. So it works quite nicely. If your share price has basically done this, and you got the grant down here, you're not paying the tax on the difference. Of course, you do pay the tax when you sell the shares, but that's capital gains. That's not such a big deal. You can set up your scheme. There are rules around it. There's rules around the vesting schedule. There's a bit of a sort of cultural difference between us and the US. I understand in the US, tech startups often you vest every month. In the UK, you tend to vest in sort of bigger tranches, but like 2 years down the line. And Barry's going to come on to breaking up and so on with your employees, but the reason for that is if you dole out share grants to all your employees and they leave before they have exercised, the grant sort of vanishes into thin air and they don't walk away with part of your company.
Did you say that the tax is on the base price of the option,
right,
or on the difference?
Right. So the income tax charge is on the base price as against what was paid for the grant. Really, nothing is paid for the grant. So let's say when the grant is made, the shares are worth £1 each, and when you exercise, they're worth £10. You're only paying tax on £1 a share rather than £10 a share. So there's obviously a good saving. Typically, we see with startups an option pool of around 10%. I think that's pretty normal, which means if you're giving them to lots of staff, you're talking about a fraction of a percentage for junior employees. Maybe an important hire will take a couple of percentage. And maybe a senior hire will have their investing schedule as well. And you see that quite often. I also just want to touch on another issue with shares, which is more a founder issue than an employee issue, but it does come up, so I'm going to address it. The taxman, when you get shares issued to you, the taxman doesn't care about the percentage of the company that you own. They generally look at the value of the price per share that you're getting. So I'll give you a scenario. Two founders, set up a company, take one share each. Sensible thing to do. They find an investor who wants to put in £100,000 for 10% of the business. Right. So they do what seems perfectly logical to them. They've got 2 shares in the company, but now they need to give 10% away. So they go and issue 98 new shares. They give 10 of them to the investor, and they give themselves another 44. So you have a position where you had 50-50, and it now goes 45, 45, 10. So a normal human being would say each founder has given up 5% of their company. The taxman, however, may take the view, and I'm not saying always will, but there is the risk that the taxman will take the view that the shares have just been valued at £10,000 each. Each founder has given himself 44. That's a benefit of 440,000. And will seek to recover income tax of 40–50% plus national insurance contributions on that amount. And if my maths is correct, that adds up to a hell of a lot for Alistair Darling.